Nation is sponsored by SwissAmerica.com, the only company I trust to protect my wealth with gold and silver. Call 800-BUY-COIN. Approaching the mysticism. I think that's what I'm going to be doing with the rest of my life anyway. I am so not in this dimension anymore. I feel like I've taken a step on another ladder, and I don't know when it started. It could have happened the other night for all I know. But let's talk about this from a pragmatic point of view without me getting into my personal belief system or where I'm coming from or where I'm going. We had a caller who said his son is getting married. He's gay. San Francisco. Very nice caller, very nice gentleman. And he said he thinks it should be decided on local law, state law, not federal law, that the Supremes have no right giving one blanket opinion. And a very intelligent listener just sent me this. She says, a Sharia Muslim community could then vote that female circumcision is legal and all women must be circumcised. A Jewish Orthodox community could dictate that all have to keep kosher or whatever the laws may be. And so therefore you cannot permit local law to trump federal law in this case. Because if you did, then you could say, well, some local law would like to trump federal civil rights law. They don't want the EEOC in their community. Go away. I mean, you see, understand, you can't have it both ways. So this is a very interesting case. This is why we're all talking about it. And the Supreme Court is talking about it. Let's take a quick caller. Line number 1, Sheldon on KCMO in Kansas City. Welcome to the Savage Nation. What's on your mind?
Yeah, Michael. I wanted to give you a quick testimony. You know, back in the day when I was listening to you for 10 years, I was like in excruciating pain as a pastor, and was just my life was so bleak, black, dark, and God used you to just like, you were one of the only sources in my life other than my granddaughter that could bring any kind of happiness into my life. And one time somebody called you and said, Michael, should we have children? And I remember listening so closely, because at that point I was prepared to get my 6 daughters together and apologize to them for bringing them into the world. Without any hesitation, instantaneously after he presented his case, he said, I'm a young man. We don't know if we want to bring any children into the world. Without any hesitation, you said, absolutely, you have to have children because they're the future. People had children in concentration camps. And the thing is, I over the years, I've just seen that I tell people, I said, it's like there's the DNA of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob are just straining their morality and Moses to just speak through your voice. Not that I always agree with everything, and one of your postures that you've taken in recent times, or you've always taken it towards homosexuality, is a sort of, a gesture of magnanimity and, sexual libertarianism, which is, it doesn't really matter. Do what you want to do. But would you feel that way, if you knew that it might, end up in wrecking everything? And we should, if you look at the history of nations, you see that the wise men in all generations, they sought to discourage homosexuality. They realized some of them that, it's going to exist in the society. But just like adultery and fornication, we don't take those things and put them before the people and say, now, this is a good thing. That's the difference here. Like, what would happen in our schools if our teachers would get up with the students and say, today we're going to talk about adultery. This is a good thing. Of course not. Everybody knows it exists in our society, and we've seen the destruction that it wreaks in people's lives. Nobody likes to see a home broken up through an adulterous affair, whatever. It happens, but you don't call it a good thing. And the thing is, the consequences of putting this thing into law and calling it a good thing is very severe. If you look at the ancient cultures, essentially when they wound down and disintegrated, it always had to do with immorality of all kinds. Now, we're given one example in history, of course, in the book of Genesis. Whether you believe in God or not, I think it goes to show that you could say that even if God didn't send down, fire and destruction, that basically cultures self-destruct when they get so sexually immoral. And it's like, and it begins by taking something that the wise men in all generations have essentially said, this isn't a good thing. We don't want to celebrate it. We certainly don't want to make it legal.
But hold on. If you want to go to the Bible, and you said so many things, I can only pick one point of departure. And it's not to disagree with you necessarily, but we should not glorify the ancients. Because at the risk of doing so, by doing so, we risk losing perspective on here. For example, in Genesis, we learn that Lot inseminated his own daughters. Where's the morality in that?
Well, it's not. There's a lot of things in the Bible that don't.
It says, "Our father is old, and there is not a man on the earth to come into us after the manner of all the earth. Come, let us make our father drink wine, and we will lie with him, that we may preserve the seed of our father." And they made their father drink wine that night. And the firstborn went in and lay with her father, and he knew not when she lay down, nor when she arose. You know, the Bible is quite a rich piece of literature, Sheldon. And I heard everything that you said. And I'm not saying that I believe in gay marriage, that it should be the law of the land. I never said that. I never said that. On the other hand, I don't think we have any right to dictate to people what their sexual behavior ought to be.
Join the Savage Nation. Call now, 855-400-SAVAGE. 855-400-7282. Savage.
We're talking about beauty, we're talking about truth, but ultimately, even if we're discussing something as prosaic as the law, which can be quite elegant, by the way, to the lawyer who studies the law rather than uses the law, we're talking about gay marriage, which ultimately comes down to a discussion of human happiness, isn't it? Have you heard anyone put it in that context? Happiness, we're talking about human happiness. We do every day when we talk politics. The Republicans say that you will be happier if you vote Republican. Hillary Clinton, the demagogue, says you will be happier if you let me take money from those who earned it and give it to those who don't earn it. You will be happier. More people will be happier. They're promising happiness. So everything that we are talking about on radio or actually in our life is usually about happiness, right? So where am I going with this? Well, let me explain it to you in another way. Things happen to us in life that sometimes are bad, and we say they're bitter. But you know that medicines can be both bitter, and sometimes they can give you a sweet medicine, honey-coated. So bitterness sometimes can be a good medicine. And the most important thing I want to say to you is this, and it's a mystical statement in its own way. If you read the mystical teachings of the ancient Jews, the Kabbalists, they will say to you, a person should not become depressed by his sins, for this is Satan's device for separating us even further from God. That's something that can put things upside down for you. Many of us sin, all of us sin one way or another, little sins, big sins. And then some of us get depressed from our sins, which makes us sin even more. We know the cycle, right? And that's the mistake we make, because the mystics say that is Satan's device for separating us even further from God, and we spiral out of control. So what you must do is look for the holy sparks of God, if you want to call it God, which can be found even in sinful situations. I don't know if I explained it properly to you, but I went through a very deep period in my own life of soul searching. I don't know how many years ago, it doesn't matter. And it was only when I came upon that idea that even in mistakes, even in so-called sin, could we find God, that there is no pure evil on earth. That I realized that there's much more to dimensions of reality than we imagine. And then I was able to understand, for example, you look at the moon. The moon has a light side and a dark side, but it's still the moon. But you have to look at the whole moon. It's not a two-dimensional sphere. It's a sphere. Okay? And we are a sphere. Some of us are like moon men. We're light and dark all day long, up and down, up and down, up and down. We deal with it. And when I get on the radio, I've said as recently as today to somebody that I fly like an eagle for 3 hours a day, and for 21 hours a day I crawl like a worm. Well, right now I'm trying to help you understand that this issue of gay marriage goes far beyond the legalistic discussions that are going on inside the Supreme Court. It's a discussion and the result of this discussion will change society forever, one way or the other. That's how seminal this topic is. So we can play the sound bites. And, for example, let's play clip number 5, which is Justice Alito on the limits of same-sex marriage.
Suppose we rule in your favor in this case, and then after that, a group consisting of 2 men and 2 women apply for a marriage license. Would there be any ground for denying them the license?
Well, there you go. And then the swing voter is Justice Anthony Kennedy. He's, it's always split, and there's always one swing voter, Kennedy, and he usually determines the outcome of a Supreme Court case. He seems to be tilting against gay marriage in clip 8. Listen to this.
When you think about these cases, you think about words or cases, and the word that keeps coming back to me in this case is millennia, plus time. This definition has been with us for millennia, and it's very difficult for the court to say, oh, well, we know better.
See, so the swing voter, Justice Kennedy, is saying the court doesn't have the right to change millennia of understanding of marriage. At least that's what he's saying. Whether he will vote that way is another story. Then we have this interesting exchange between Sam Alito on why polygamy shouldn't be illegal if you pass gay marriage. And you have 2 sides of the argument in clip 9 that are worth listening to.
What if these are 4 people, 2 men and 2 women. It's not the sort of polygamous marriages that existed in other societies and still exist in some societies today. And let's say they're all consenting adults, highly educated. They're all lawyers. What would be the ground under the logic of the decision you would like us to hand down in this case? What would be the logic of denying them the same right?
Number one, I assume the states would rush in and say that when you're talking about multiple people joining into a relationship, that is not the same thing that we've had in marriage, which is on the mutual support and consent of 2 people. Setting that aside, even assuming it is within the fundamental right.
Well, I don't know what kind of a distinction that is, because a marriage between 2 people of the same sex is not something that we have had before.
So you can see it's a much more complicated argument than it appears to be. Let's take some calls on the Savage. And remember what we're talking about here. The gay community believes they will be happy if the justices decide that gay marriage shall be the law of the land. Religious people and others are saying they will be unhappy unless the justices say the opposite. The rioters in Baltimore felt they would be happy if they burned the city to the ground and robbed toilet paper, booze, and sneakers. Now they're happy. They have toilet paper, they have booze and sneakers, and their city's burned to the ground. The very stores that they ransacked are gone. But they were happy, weren't they? Isn't happiness the point? Well, they burnt the city to the ground. The little college girls in New York were tying up the Holland Tunnel and running in the streets. They're having the best time of their lives, hoping to get lucky, meeting a hipster with a beard, maybe have sex under the bridge. They think they're revolutionaries like Lenin and Marx. They think that if they bring the society down in New York and elsewhere, they will be happy. They're going to erect a new society, and they'll be very happy. All of our motivations are based upon happiness. The new Black Panthers, they said they're like the Founding Fathers, and they're willing to kill white people for the black nation they want. They'll be happy if they kill. Wherever you look, the Islamists, the world will be a happier place if they kill the infidel or convert the infidel. So everything is based upon human happiness when you think about it. Whether you eat, whether you don't eat, whether you run, whether you don't run, whether you play ball or don't play ball, you buy a new car or don't buy a new car, go on a yacht, don't go on a yacht, buy a new house, don't buy a new house, put in a new deck, take out the old deck, buy a new couch, not buy a new couch, get a haircut, don't get a haircut, get a tongue screw, don't get a tongue screw, get a tattoo, don't get a tattoo. It's all based upon the myth of happiness, isn't it? Yeah, Robert's shaking his head. I think I'm going to give lessons in mysticism. I think after this show, I'm going to offer seminars starting in June and July, small groups of seminars. Michael Savage on the meaning of mysticism in human life. I would go to such a thing if a guy like me was giving the talk. But I don't want to face idiots. You see, this is the problem. I don't mean people who don't understand me. I mean people who will disrupt me. And that's why I don't do any kind of speeches, by the way. I'm distracting you from the discussion at hand. Many in talk radio give speeches every week.